There we go. Welcome. It's our Bible study. I'm trying a new technique. I was sharing a little bit earlier. We're going to have this topic be preached about. The topic is what does the Bible say about love, or what do Christians say about love? So that will be our sermon, and then for the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to have a Bible study so you guys can help the preacher figure out what to say by helping through the Bible study here and getting us all primed. And then if you are really have some spare time, you can go back and watch the preaching on the Zoom webpage. So you can hit a double whammy if you want, or just join us on Sunday. So we have the topic of the week is Valentine's Day, and so I thought that would be the appropriate time to talk about love. I don't remember the last time Valentine's Day came on a Sunday, so this is kind of our appropriate topic maybe. And I've been reading C.S. Lewis's book on the four loves, but maybe you've heard of the four different words for love that the Greeks have. Has anybody heard of that? Different variations of the four different words for love. Yeah, Fred, can't see everybody's hands. Got to move my screen. I didn't hear. Dave and Vicky, you heard of those? Yeah. So this is C.S. Lewis is the same guy who wrote Chronicles of Narnia, which is a great movie that everybody has made a blockbuster movie out of. And so this is quite dated. I think it was published in the 40s maybe. And so the Greek is still the same Greek, published in 1960 evidently. So the four words for love. Why is the world so taken by Valentine's Day, by the way, since we're going to go there first?
Hallmark. It's
Hallmark.
It's a business move. I mean, really, they have invented holidays just to sell cards. So sorry,
Right.
I hate to be cynical, but
i.e. Grandparents' Day. How many of you got your card for Grandparents' Day? I don't even know when it is, but
I have no idea.
So when I was in Ireland, it was Father's Day, and it's not an Irish tradition. And so the family I was staying with, the father got a Father's Day card. He goes, "Oh, really? A Father's Day card?" It was like the most bizarre thing in the world. He goes, "Well, thank you, son." It was like totally not expected. But Hallmark was doing a great job with their marketing. So I do confess I bought my Valentine's gifts today, so I helped the economy out today. So the four different words for love, I had to look up this one for the Greek, storge, love of the parent with the child. So our newest parent here in the room is Logan. Anything happened to you when your child was born, Logan?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like one of those, you think in your life that you have this love for people. No, it's all a lie. Because it's totally different when you're looking at your kid and you realize, okay, this is the person I will die for. So that's where like, you could say that about other people, but you just know. So yeah, it does. It has a profound effect. And I don't think that there's anything that can stop that love or that bond.
Right. So adopted families, do they have that love?
Yeah, why not?
It can be, anybody have testimonies? Oh, welcome, Celia.
I don't know. I think that's an interesting question. I've placed a lot of kids for adoption, and my wife was adopted. But I know for my wife, it was really important for us to have our own natural born children. And so I'm suspecting that she felt Well, I know she felt like it's different being adopted than being natural and being loved in the same way.
Interesting. Yeah. I think you can certainly have all kinds of different adopted families, but I'm sure there's some that are would die for their children, just like Logan was saying. Any other parents have testimonies?
Well, I want to say I think it's there are two different experiences that Storge or whatever it is speaking to, because experiencing love as a child is is wonderful, but then experiencing love as a parent, I found to be a whole nother, oh my goodness, here I know love as a child and love within a family. I think that's sort of missing from here. And then it was like, oh my goodness, here's a whole nother layer of maturing love on my part as a parent. And I think also as a parent, the parent-child relationship that you're talking about in relation to adoption is that there is a profound bonding that goes on in carrying a child and birthing a child. And I think that's what's the word? Is it bonding? There's another word that you talk about, but you see this in natural born families where the child is not, attachment is the word I'm looking for. So that's a whole disorder unto itself, or functionality unto itself. So
Right. A parent needs, not every parent naturally attaches to their child, evidently. It seems to be very natural for some and doesn't always happen. And then children attach to something for survival, but not always in a way that gives them the step, the boost that they need to survive and function well.
Well, we probably all know either stories or maybe even know persons who are parents that should never have been parents. I mean, in other words, how they treat their child. I mean, that's why we have child services, and I mean it. So I really don't think it has anything to do with. I mean, obviously there's parental love and it's your own kid, but yeah, there are other factors as well. And we know people who are hurt when they grow, when they are kids, often grow up and have problems, if they don't deal with those things. So it's pretty complex, I think.
Well, there's the scripture of the sins of one generation being visited on the third and whatever generation, so on down the line. And my experience has been that in terms of parenting, that's certainly true. I mean, I've been in court so many times and heard parents who had mistreated their children say, "That's not abuse. You ought to have seen how my dad treated me." It's a pass down because you parent the way you tend to parent the way you were parented, unless there are some interventions along the line, I think. Or at least that's been my experience.
I'll tell you, just to kind of give to this, what you just said, Fred, is I absolutely I am not parenting the same way that my parents parented. And it takes a serious conscious effort to not do that. It is not something you just wake up and you're like, oh, I'm going to do something different. No. It takes an effort. One of the major things is that me and my family already disagree on, even that we have for almost the entire 3 years of my son's life, is spanking. We do not do that. Me and Monica do not do that. But my entire family, my parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, that is their go-to for discipline. And it takes a conscious effort to not go back to that, what you learn, what you're taught your whole life.
Absolutely. So yeah, and it's a chain that can be broken, but it's not without a lot of intentionality on your part. So any grandparent stories on what it's like to be a grandparent, Larry and Donna?
Go ahead.
I think you still have a lot of love, a lot of affection, a lot of, um, but you want to back off on the parenting, although you have to do it if you are keeping the child for a day or an hour or whatever. Yeah, you still have a great love for those grandkids.
They can worm their way into your heart, I think, huh?
That was I was never looking forward to being a grandparent. It was never a big deal for me, but I remember kind of cuddling, snuggling with Annabelle and Rebecca and thought, my heart is just going to burst wide open. I have never experienced love in that kind of a way. It just, anyway, so it's complicated and it's another layer and a different experience.
So how come we only have one word for love in the English language? So the next word, philia, which is where the city Philadelphia, that's known as the city of brotherly, sisterly love, philia of love of friends. And absolutely, do we have friends that we love? Is that one of the feelings that we have?
Thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.
So Celia, you're a friend expert.
Trying to unmute, sometimes it takes me a while. Yeah, I don't have kids or grandkids, but I do have a lot of friends that I love. I love my relatives. I have two little nieces out here who I really love also. And earlier, I can't remember who mentioned that when you have them for the day or for the weekend or whatever, you have to kind of stop yourself from parenting. You kind of just want to enjoy it. And like Logan said, I find that I am so tempted to kind of discipline them the way we were disciplined, um, because their parents definitely do something different. It's all about like negotiation, like, or you get points or you get, whereas I know my parents were like, I said no, and that was it. And you didn't, And so sometimes I want to do that, but then I'm like, well, I don't want them to go into culture shock and then they don't want to come over anymore. So then I have to adapt. But yeah, it's kind of interesting the different ways we experience and share love, because I find it to be an all encompassing type of emotion, but yet it is so different in every different circumstance. So,
It switches a lot. That's what I
mhm.
was reading in C.S. Lewis. There's really different flavors for love, and yeah, you're right. When you look at the eros love, you don't always eros love your spouse. There are times it's like, we're done with that. That's not the only kind of love that keeps people together, I don't think. So who knew that there's only one word? Which word is the one that explains what's going on in your life? Well, it doesn't even begin to explain what's going on. Then we have this big deal about Valentine's Day, it's the most important day of the year. And if your spouse or your loved one doesn't get it right, your whole, everything comes crashing into. So all of you men out there, do your best to make your honey special or whatever. But that doesn't sustain a marriage. I don't think. It doesn't keep it going forever.
So I think what you're touching on, I mean, you said we've only got one word for it, and we get pretty dysfunctional about love and love marriage relationships and everything else. And then you get all this advertising that says this is the way you've got to do it, and it's got to be this diamond versus that diamond. And I mean, we really are messed up because of our English language, at least in part.
Right. And we're messed up when we're told this is the end all be all, and this will make you happy if you do this. So we have the Sharons who've been married maybe longer than any of us here. You better give us your secret to longevity. I think we got.
Lyle, are you muted?
Yeah.
I know, 62
Okay.
years now, going up on 63 if we make it that long. And it's making a good picking one who's a pacifist and doesn't know how to shoot guns. And, that's number one. And someone long suffering.
Oh, that's priceless.
Oh, well, I think when we got married, the idea was it was marriage for life. And you need to respect the other person and give them some room to do some of the things they like to do. And don't try to change them. You can't really change a person. That's not your job. If you don't like them when you marry them, you better put up with it if you want to make it work. But I think I got the pick of the other side too, so I've been quite happy with
Okay, Vivian or Lyle, does your patience help you at all? Because Vivian, you have the patience of a saint. You sat down and helped me do math homework one time. So I know you've got patience of a saint.
I've forgotten that. I didn't remember that.
Well, that's good, because we're going to talk about, we missed 1 Corinthians 13, the first part, or there it is, verse 4. Love is patient, love is kind. But we have agape love, or as people in non-Christians call it, agape. it's a word that only Christians seem to talk about, agape. And those of us who are Christians probably wouldn't stay Christians if it weren't for agape love. What's there to keep you coming back to the faith and to the faith community? Is there anything that keeps you wanting to come back to God?
God keeps me wanting to come back to God.
Does God punish you, Vicki?
It's the yearning, and when I think agape, I think that me practicing agape love, unconditional love of others, but it's God's unconditional love of me that's pretty amazing. So and that, to get to that level of love and understanding, going both ways, and your connection and living into all of that is another whole advancement of understanding what the heights and depths of love.
Yeah, God's love is is, you know, something that can change people's lives, turn them completely around, stop them in their tracks, give them a new direction. Like, you know, we have Saul getting knocked to the ground and getting converted. And, you know, I think that's maybe harder for some of us who grew up in a Christian home, but certainly I've heard testimonies of people who've felt God's love. Have you heard those testimonies, anybody? Or have a testimony?
My mother mentioned one time that she, I don't know, she might have been quite sick or something, but she felt the love of God so strong. She said after that, she never feared death.
Right.
I
Right.
think
That's
she came pretty close to death at that time.
right. So when I look at the scriptures, and I'm trying to, like, my eyes are like popping open. So if I speak in the tongues of men and angel, but do not have love, okay, which love is it? You want to, anybody know the Greek? Which love is this talking about? And love is patient, love is kind. Which love is that they're talking about? Well, I cheated and looked ahead, and you can go on the internet and find out what the Greek word is, but it's, guess what? Yes, I missed it. It's the agape love. So if I speak in the tongue of men and angels, but do not have agape, I am a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and agape. But the greatest of these is agape love. So we get, you know, we get to hear this scripture almost every Christian wedding you go to, but it doesn't just have to do with weddings. To me, it seems like it's something that can be used every single day, not just at your wedding. So the John 5:1, my command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. So the Greek for that one is also agape, and to lay down one's life for one's philia, or whatever that word is, Philadelphia or whatever. That's the, help me out here, Dave. That's the Greek word for friends. Am I close?
That is, I have to look at the passage to know for sure, though. I'll look at it.
Yeah. So this agape love even extends to friends. It's not just agape is just for God, but it extends to friends, it extends to spouses, it extends to children, to parents. So, you know, this is the love that seems to flow out and all over. And then this last one, someone want to read that one? John 12:15-17.
When they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you see me? Do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep.
So I had no idea that there were two different words for love in that passage, that Jesus is saying, do you agape love me? And Peter says, yeah, I philia love you, brotherly love you. And so it was like, whoa. So the response then is, feed my lambs, take care of my sheep. And so no matter what, the response is the same. Do you love me? You still need to be sharing and spreading and passing on that love. Kind of like pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward, Peter. So has anybody known the difference of those words in that passage? Has anybody studied that?
No, that was like, oh, a big eye opener for me. That's pretty profound. You know,
Yeah.
back to those poor disciples who don't get it. But with these layers of love that we talk about, or these different components of love, I think each one grows on the other, and the agape is the really big, hard one. And the disciples are doing the best they can with what they got. And Jesus continues to do his wonderful teaching and helping them understand agape. So that was like, whoa, that just blew me away.
What did Jesus lower the standard when he asked whether he loved him the third time with filial love instead of agape?
I never thought of it that way. What do you guys think?
Well, I don't know if he lowered the standard. Again, I think he's just coming. He's coming to their level with what they can understand, because Peter didn't quite get it a few sentences previous.
I'd agree, Vicki. I don't think he necessarily lowered the standard. I'd say he did come to their level, because there are certain types of love that you won't understand unless you're in that position, or at least I certainly didn't. I mean, I have definitely different levels of love, because I have family that I was born into, and then I have people and family that I choose. And I never had that until I had come to Colorado. So I would never have understood that then than I do now. So I think he was just more of going to the level of understanding that they had.
Yeah, I can't understand friendship unless I've been in a friendship, right? Yeah, and I can't understand the agape love until I've been in an agape community where people are showing me that. I don't know how I would find out about agape love if it weren't for all of you guys,
One of the books that I have, and I don't see it right off, but the author in it said that you cannot love others unless you have been loved. Have you ever heard that expressed before, and do you think there's any validity to that?
That's profound.
Well, if you go to that adoption conversation, the parenting conversation, if how that's the first place that you learn and experience love, and it could be good or it could be bad. It could be love or it could be something else. And so that's where we go for folks who didn't experience that attachment, who didn't experience that love, who didn't experience a wonderful, caring, kind, loving family. You get twisted when you don't have that. So can you experience it in other places? And are we missing other kinds of love? I was watching the sunset. That made me happy. Did I love the sunset? My parents would always, Mom would say, you can't love a thing. You can only love a person. You know, it's an interactive thing. But I'm working on that. I think she was right. But on the other hand, I think it's a whole nother level of connection and love, and how I see myself being a part of creation, all of God's creation.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't, we talk about love all the time in our culture. I love that dress. Oh, I love the way your hair looks. You know, there's only one word, and we're so limited, and it, it doesn't have the same meaning. I think that this God love is something that we can try to teach someone, but I don't know that you can actually teach your kids how to love. I think, I mean, you can model it, right? So, we
I don't know.
sing, Jesus loves me, this I know.
Well, and isn't that a way to, well, I don't know. That raises another question, I guess. If you have never loved, could you, how would you experience, if you've never loved or been loved, how would you experience Jesus' love? I mean, how would you, I'd have to think about that a little bit.
It would take something profound. So when you were talking about, can people that have never been loved, can they love? I was in a group therapy with sexual assault survivors, and some of them they were children, and they never felt love. So they wrecked every relationship, whether that be platonic or whatever. They wrecked every relationship because they don't know how to feel it. So I think it just takes something profound to actually, and Jesus can do that, but I think it has to take something very profound to make it to where they can feel it and understand it.
I agree, but well, you got me working this. This is a fascinating discussion. So if you can have some understanding or absorb the fact that you were created in love, that is how God is love. God is love. You are God's creation. You are loved by God, and you can embody and understand and appreciate love. But I think everything that Logan said is true. And so those essential beginning experiences are essential beginnings. And so I think something profound can happen, but you gotta be made aware of it or have some sense. I think people do. You also see resilience, great resilience in children and people. And it's like, where did that come from? Their sense of self, and they know that there is something else, and that they have a sense of worth and work hard to claim it. So, I think that makes Jesus's questions even more important. Do you love me? And can you figure that out? And that I have this love for you. That kicks it up 10 notches.
One of the things I'm thinking about is a lot of us probably have heard the phrase, it takes a village, and so, which is a good thing, because, any parent can't do it on their own. I mean, it just doesn't work. I mean, you get encouragements from others. And I was thinking about, I came across this, so try this on. That passage where Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And, 3 times. So one interpretation I read said that Peter is someone has experienced trauma. It's been very, very traumatic to see Jesus crucified, and he denies him and so on. And that another way to see this is that, Jesus starts out by saying agape, but then he moves to philia because John keeps responding with philia, that Jesus actually meets Peter where he is. In other words, it's like a compassionate move to do that and to respond to Peter so in other words, it's not making Peter out to be the bad guy, sort of like because of, you're a failure, Peter. No, it's saying you've been through a tough time and I'm here, and yes, I'm glad you can love me in the way that you can, and I want you to feed my sheep. It's kind of like Jesus is feeding his sheep. I found that one pretty interesting too.
I like that.
He had to make it through somehow. Peter had to make it through somehow to get, to survive this trauma that he's been through.
Yeah. So this was a interpretation that was informed by someone who was trained in trauma studies and worked with trauma victims. It just and that goes back to, we're talking about, okay, there's these 4 words for love in Greek. And so it just reminds me that when I'm studying the Bible, I need to be careful about my, what I draw out from it. This other thought is with me, and I gotta say it. I know a lot of you probably are familiar with James Dobson, and his views about how you're supposed to love and discipline. I mean, lots of Christians have used that, and lots of Christians have said, think that's the way, and you spank your kids. Others have said that's abuse. It's not the way to do it. I mean, so it's pretty important how we interpret Scripture.
So I have a question for Fred. There's studies about resilience that Vicki was talking about, but I think there's also studies about one caring adult can turn a child's life around. So maybe it wasn't your parent or your family, but maybe one teacher, makes it. I heard stories about this recently on TV where, a kid will jump through hoops because they know somebody at school cares about them. Have you heard any studies about like that, Fred, or seen that in your work?
I don't know about studies, but I certainly think it's true from what I've seen. And my wife again was adopted, and she often commented about if it hadn't been for her adoptive parents, her life would have been quite different. She struggled with, her mother gave up 4 children, 3 boys and a girl, and her mother took the 4 boys back and did not take her back. And that was a struggle for her. We found that out when she was about 50 years old. And I think she struggled with that until the day she died then. But yes, I think I've seen so many awesome foster parents that made such a huge difference in kids' lives that they wouldn't have had a chance. And I think about one of the, and this is probably inappropriate to even bring up here, but probably one of my worst, more recent experiences was a mother who was raised in foster care. And I remember she woke her 4-year-old out of his sleep and choked him to death. And did that because she said that Jesus loved him and she wanted him to go be with Jesus and not have to grow up in foster care like she did. There are just so many weird things that people think. And, I'll never forget that one.
Yeah, I mean, you can see maybe where that parent love is, I can understand why someone might shoot their kids before they kill themselves, thinking that they're doing their kids a favor. I mean, it's just a real weird thing, but it might be a twisted version of parental love gone wrong or something like that.
It's an awful thing, and it's just an awful thing. But the flip side of it is, I've seen so many foster parents that were just awesome and took kids that you didn't think had a snowball's chance, and gave them a life, and they grew from that and became exceptional contributors to God's kingdom and to the world.
And and some of us had aunts or uncles, or we are aunts or uncles. Did they raise your hand if anyone thought that made a difference in your life?
Sure.
I mean, it's just unbelievable what a loving adult can do in someone's life.
So I can't give you the statistics properly, but because it's been years and years, but it's exactly what Logan is saying. So Logan, take this to heart or don't take it to heart, but it does take a village to raise a child. And so in terms of childcare, that's where I got this, was because I was doing a preschool program. And in preschool programs or school, you talk about the student teacher ratio. And I think in preschool, it's something like 1 to 4 or 1 to 7. I forget what it is. 1 to 6. Okay. 1 to 6. But in the village, and we don't live in the village anymore, the communitarian tribal kind of societies, it was flipped, completely flipped, like 7 adults for every 1 child. And so when you got 7 grown-ups keeping an eyeball out on 1 little kid running around, they're getting a whole different set of messages than 1 adult on 6 or 7 children. And that makes such a difference. And we have totally lost that. Now, church, coming together in church is a wonderful way to do that. Or, any number of different kinds of organizations. But I think church is a unique place for.
Nikki, I'm on board with the village. So I don't know if I told you, but I grew up in a small town, mile long, half a mile wide. We didn't even have a stoplight. So everybody knew everybody. So my parents, all they had to do was call someone on the other end of town and somebody could lay eyes on me and knew where I was. So I had that experience. And also I've already solicited parenting advice from people, including some people on this call.
So I keep thinking of this scripture that can you learn how to love if you haven't been loved? And there's what's the greatest commandment? What does Jesus teach us as the greatest commandment?
The Lord your God.
Love one another as I have loved you.
Yeah, love others as we.
Love the Lord your God, yeah, and love your neighbor as yourself. Donna gets surprised. And so I'm guessing, what do you guess that word is that you're using for that? Love the Lord your God? What word do you think they're using in the Greek?
I think it's agape.
Probably is agape. And so love your neighbor as yourself. And so that to me says that we're going to have to learn how to do that agape thing for ourselves, right? I mean, you don't just get to love the Lord your God, but you get to learn how to have that agape love for yourself to be part of that plan that God has and that kingdom that God has. So is there, it's not just one person who can teach you agape love. It's not just mom or dad or parents or brothers. There's maybe a whole planet of people who are out there trying to help pass that on. So do we have another way of living then when it comes to us as churches? Are we do we have a job then that we need to be doing something for other people?
Well, we should. We should have an expectation amongst ourselves and other believers that we're not here to judge. My favorite saying is, Jesus isn't hiring, so he doesn't need me to help him. The only thing I'm here to do is just to love people, and that means no matter where they came from, no matter who they are, no matter what they look like, no matter what they've done in their life. So whether it's, the child from down the street or it's the axe murderer that just got sprung, it doesn't matter. You're supposed to be commanded to love all. I think we've lost that in the American church. That's what I'm going to call it. In the American church, we've certainly lost that because we would prefer to just mingle with who comes on Sunday and who looks like me and believes like me and talks like me and that kind of thing. We've totally lost that, but there should be an expectation amongst our church and amongst believers in general that we should be following the New Testament and living as Jesus would live, because he would welcome everybody at the table.
So if God can love everybody, then who are we to do something other than what God is teaching us to do? Yeah. So Celia, you grew up in a different country than the United States. Do you see anything that you learned about how God loves people different than you, or you've had to be in a culture where you had to go with the crowd or whatever?
Actually, I find it very similar. Earlier, when Logan was talking about the fact that he grew up in this really small town and his mom could call somebody at the other end and they would keep an eye out, I had kind of a similar experience. I mean, I grew up on a very small island and it seemed like everybody knew everybody. And so there was always someone who knew your parent or something. And so you better behave yourself because by the time you got home, your mom already knew what happened and was like waiting on you. So it was just better to, behave yourself all the time. So in that sense, I think I kind of experienced that love in that sense, but there was also a very high degree of fear that went along with that. Because again, like I said, in the community that I grew up, they got the switch off the tree and soaked it in seawater before they came at you with it, So you never wanted to be in that position. So you behaved yourself, but it was always probably not so much because you wanted to be good, but because you knew what was on the other end if you weren't good, and there were eyes everywhere, so to speak. So in that sense, I'm not sure exactly if I would call that love. Um, Here in America, my experience with love has been kind of similar in that sense, because I kind of feel like there are a lot of people who to your face profess one sentiment, but behind your back professes something very, very different, and which I can be very painful and hurtful. It's kind of funny that Logan said this because I feel like the same way. I've been going to churches and stuff my whole life, but until I went to Colorado, I never really felt like I had a love community in a church or in any sort of social setting. And I do believe that the Lord led me to this congregation because I immediately felt an acceptance and just a belonging that I had not felt before, and in a funny way that I did not know that I was missing until I encountered it. And I thought, that's that's the emptiness. That's, the emptiness that's been there, that's no longer there. That's what I've been searching for something for, and now I have it. So yeah. So I mean, I'm not sure if I'm necessarily answering your question, but in
Um,
terms of like experiencing love and showing love, and my experience with this congregation has definitely helped me to understand when we talk about God's love and his unfailing love and his love for everyone. Because I think until then, I'm not necessarily sure that I actually believed it 100%. I kind of felt like it was conditional. And if, because you're taught to pray that way too. Like, if you do this, God will reward you. If you do that, God will reward you. It wasn't just God loves you, and regardless of what you did, you can turn to him and he will still love you. So it's been kind of a learning curve for me, I would say, but definitely I kind of feel like I am more willing to accept now that God loves me unconditionally than I've probably ever been in my entire life.
wow. So that's quite a story. And I mean, that's kind of what God does, it's like one person at a time. We're getting touched, with this. I didn't deserve any of anybody's love. What did I do to deserve anything? And yet God still loves me. How can that possibly be?
Love, Celia, that you said learning curve, because I don't think we've been talking. I'm talking layers, and I think there's still so much more to figure out for me, for sure, about understanding love in all its different words and ways and forms and expressions and heights and depths. So yeah, if you ever think you have all of love figured out, you probably don't. You can be assured you haven't got it all figured out.
And then COVID comes along. Does anybody think they've had to learn anything about love during COVID?
I was thinking of a verse. I didn't know where it was. I had to look it up. But you ever heard the verse, "Love covers a multitude of sins"? And it's actually in First Peter. And whether or not, without getting into issues about who actually wrote that book, but it's associated with Peter. I mean, to me, that's just like Peter knew he had sinned, and his experience then is love covers my sins, and that's kind of what I think about it with the church, because all of us are not always at the same level of lovableness, right? But love covers a multitude of sins, and I think that's when the church is at its best, expressing that kind of love. It's a great, it's not just a great feeling, it's a great foundation to live one's life and to share that with others.
Thinking of COVID, think about the people who sacrificed their life to fight this vaccine by going in and being doctors and nurses, and some of them died, gave everything for, going in every day, just exhausted. That load, that's a whole nother level of filial love, I guess, is what, think about. How do they do that?
I would agree. My grandpa passed of COVID, but in his days in the hospital, actually one of the people that I grew up with, that I was friends with, I think I actually have a deeper love for her now, because she took such incredible care of my grandpa. And then she also had the time, even though she was exhausted and pregnant, she was she took the time to also make sure that I was okay. And then she as a friend of Monica and I's, and she did the same thing for us when her dad passed 10 days later. So
Oh,
she is someone that I think that I went from having just a regular friendship love for to, oh my gosh, you were there for me in the time that is unbelievable. So COVID wise, that would be where I think that I have a stronger love for our healthcare workers.
amen. Larry and Donna, you have a grandson in-law brother who is facing COVID. I guess, is he doing okay?
He's doing much better and he's home, and they're expecting a child in March. And the last Jonathan talked to us said that he hopes he has all his energy back by that time because he knows he'll need it.
Praying for that family. Think of all the sacrifices that have gone into the world just in the last year. People stepping way above the call of duty. I'm going to stop the recording.